ekam aksharam hrudi nirantaram bhasate swayam likyate katham. Hridaya kuhara madhye kevalam brahmamatram yaham iti sakshat atmarupena bhati hrudi vishamanasa swam chinvata majjata chalanarodha atmanishto bhavatvam. Deham mృణ్మయవత్ జడాత్మకం aham buddhirna tasyastyatho naham tattata bhavashukti samay siddhatma sadbhavata oham bhavayuta kuto radhiya drishtatmanishtatmana soham spurtitaya arunachala shivaha purno vibhati swayam soham spurtitaya arunachala shivaha purno vibhati swayam. Namo Ramana. With Bhagavan's immense grace, we have been meditating on the verses of Atma Bodham, especially the translation of the Sanskrit work into Tamil by Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. We have seen that the overall layout or scheme of the work by the Acharya, one of the ways in which the various commentators have looked at it, because there have indeed been other ways of segregating these verses, but one of the ways in which these verses, the 68 verses have been divided, is to look at them as the first 6 verses showing the overall path in Jnana Marga, then 7 to 15 indicating the problem, that is the world, and how world arises due to ajnana. Then 16 to 30 the jnana marga itself. What is the path which we have to do manana about? And 31 to 41 are verses for nididhyasana. That is the verses which have to be held and driven through the subconscious to penetrate it and go beyond into self-knowledge. So that is 31 to 41 are nididhyasana verses, and 42 to 68 are the Atma, Brahma, Lakshana, as well as the Mahima of the work. These are the verses that you find in 42 to 40, 42 to 68. We are in verse number 4. We are to take up verse number 4 and 5. So the Sanskrit verses up to verse number 5 go like this. Tapobhi Kshidapapanam Shantanam Vitaraginam Mumukshunam Apekshoyam Atma Bodho Vidhiyate Bodhonyas sadhanebhyo hi sakshan mokshaika sadhanam pakasya vahnivarjnanam vina moksho na siddhyati avirodhitaya karma na vidyam vinivartaye vidya vidyam nihanteva tejas timira sangavat. Up to this we have seen today's verses. Parichinna ivajnana tanna shesati kevalaha swayam prakashate hyatma Megha payem shumanivaha Parichinna ivajnana tanna shesati kevalaha Swayam prakashate hyatma Megha payem shumaniva. The fifth verse. Ajnana kalusham jivam jnanabhyasad vinirmalam krutva jnanam swayam nashyet jalam katakarenuvat. Ajnana kalusham jivam jnanabhyasad vinirmalam krutva jnanam swayam nashyet jalam katakarenuvat. The verses take us through, the verses 4, 5, 6 take us through the three types of illusions that are presented in Advaita. But more of it a bit later. Let us take the Tamil verses. We saw that the first three verses of the work, the first verse indicated who are the disciples who can take up the sadhana. That is, tapobhi kshina papana shantana vitaragina mumukshuna apekshoyam atmabodho vidhiyate. we also discussed that the ones who have been brought to Atmavichara by Bhagavan, as Akka brought out from Ramana Gita, that one need not go into whether one has done enough tapas or not, because the Atmavichara, the Ananya Bhakti is enough to take care of the other disciplines required. Then the second verse was the essential nature of jnana. Pakasya vakniva jnanam. How jnana is of essence. The other sadhanas are not to be jettisoned. They will purify the mind. But what is of essence for the mumukshutva to moksha is jnana. And we saw the examples of many devotees of Bhagavan who were bhakti margis, but displayed all the qualities of Purna Jnanis, as we found from the japa, the shloka, the song heard in the Brahma Muhurtam by one of my brothers, the eldest brother, that the japa itself takes us across the world of neti neti, that the neti neti where nothing other than jnanam is there. All the objects have become the mere darkness that they are. We saw from Sadhu Om Swamigal that the entire Brahmanda is nothing but the darkness of ignorance, and only the jnanam is fullness. So that jnana is an essential step or toll gate which has to be crossed or which has to be held to come to moksha. Then we saw in the third verse that karma is not opposed to jnana, is not opposed to ajnana, as it derives its very existence and operation from the presence of ajnana. So it does not affect ajnana at all. So how it can remove ajnana? The jnana alone can remove ajnana. Tejas timira sangava. How even in a dark cave which has been in dense darkness for thousands or millions of years, the removal of the block and the entry of the sunlight, in that moment itself, the darkness is removed. Now that is akin to the seeing of snake and rope. That if the snake is there, then the rope is not there. If the rope is there, then the snake is not there. When the snake or the darkness is present, the light is not present. As soon as the light comes in, the rope is seen, the snake is no more seen. So it is this or that. If you see jnana, ajnana is not there. If you see ajnana, jnana is not there. Now, in the next verse, a little bit of concession is given in the metaphor. Meghapayem shumaniva. That there is ignorance is something that is covering, and when it is removed, the moment it is removed, the self shines. But let us go into the verse. This itself is another derivative from the snake and rope, but not as close a metaphor as the light and darkness, but close enough that as soon as the covering is gone, the sun, how it shines, as soon as the cloud is gone, like that, the jnana will shine. Let us see the verse. This is verse number 4. Ariyamayal maraivanadu pol Anma. Arave dekam adahi. Niraivai ilagume tanai. Iriyave meham ilagum adittan yenave. The Sanskrit verse is Parichinna ivajnana tannashe sati kevala swayam prakashate hyatma meghapaye shumaniva. The parichinna word in Sanskrit has the two meanings which the commentators have used in both ways. But Bhagavan alone has, to my reading, the limited reading that I have done, has taken to the first meaning present in the Sanskrit dictionary. The parichinna is something like covering and removal. And Bhagavan uses it for the covering of the self. Because the metaphor is also like that. The metaphor is also regarding the Megha and Amshuman. Amshuman Iva, the cloud and the sun. Bhagavan uses the parichinna with reference to the self. But many commentators use the second meaning of parichinna. Parichinna is the limitless being reduced to limited. Now, the two meanings, let me just repeat. One meaning which the popular commentaries take up is that parichinna is to limit the limitless. That opens up a lot of discussion. One of the primary fears of parichinna is that the self, the consciousness feels it is going to end. A professor, an English professor, suddenly comes to know from his doctor in a routine checkup that his back pain is of 4th degree cancer. Now that is parichinna. That the limited life is suddenly brought to one's notice because one has lived uninquiringly. Suddenly the parichinna nature is now how he takes it up, how he takes that information of the result of living in a limited way is a whole series of stories. We find, in my experience, I have seen one lady about 65 or 67, she was given the information that she is having terminal cancer, maybe 4 or 5 months. Maybe what she went through in the first few days of information, I don't know. But what manifested was that she arranged for all the distribution of whatever she had, and she arranged for the Rudram and Chamakam to be constantly chanted by her side. She was quite healthy for 6 months, and that Rudram Chamakam remained even the last moment that the breath had subsided. Till then she prepared for that. She prepared for the parichinna life. Some other people, they may start living more fully. Like the limitations they have kept, they may remove. But then that is not the sense in which Bhagavan translates this. Bhagavan's words of the Parichinna translation is Ariyamayal Maraivanadupol Anma. He is not touching the limitation to which it has reduced itself. No. So at least this verse doesn't reduce itself to those interpretations. We may go into that later, where the dream interpretation is there in verse number 6. We can go into the Parichinna nature. But Bhagavan's interpretation of Parichinna as the covering of the Hyatma, it gives this scheme of things, a beauty that the Acharya is going from direct information to a little bit ajnana, then to allowing a little bit of more room for our knowing, then for even more room where the activity of all the life is there, and also the jnana can be sought. That is in the 6th verse. The metaphors he uses are, in the 4th verse, he uses the metaphor of Meghapayem Shumaniva. Just as the Aditya, the sun, shines by itself, the moment the cloud cover is gone, the self shines by itself as soon as ignorance is removed. So, Maraivanadu pol, Parichinna is Maraivu or blocking of that which is full. That is how Bhagavan interprets. Parichinna in many of the Sanskrit commentaries is interpreted as it is actually reduced to the limited existence. Bhagavan is not going there, not yet. He is going in the 6th verse. In the 5th verse, the metaphor used is where some sadhana is involved, where some jnana sadhana is involved. And what happens to that jnana sadhana? Because jnana sadhana involves ajnana. Sadhana means some subtle work is there, and work earlier was said was avirodhiteya karma. That it is not, but jnana karma or jnana sadhana, what it does and what happens, how jnana comes about, that a little bit more room is given for our sadhana there than in the verse 4. That the metaphor is the work of sadhana also gets dissolved like the katakarenuvat, like the alum, or there is a powder in Tamil Nadu which we use, which we, when we put it in the muddied water, the powder attaches itself to the sediments and settles down, and along with the other rubbish it is filtered out. The jnana sadhana is also filtered out. So in the 5th verse, some jnana sadhana is there, and in the 6th verse, the metaphor is one of dream. That all the things that you see, that we experience here, are present, but the Swapna Simha is also there, and one is able to draw the light of jnana and wake up from that dream. So the metaphors show the jnana marga. The whole work is delineated in the 6 verses. 1, 2, 3 being the introduction. 1 is the quality of the sadhaka. 2 is the essential nature of jnana. The 3rd is that karma is not opposed to ajnana, so that cannot be the tool for removal of ajnana. Only jnana can remove ajnana, and how it does, it removes like that like the light that enters the dense darkness of millions of years and makes it run away, like that. 4th, 5th, 6th complete the discussion on the path with direct approach in 4th, Meghapayem Shumaniva, with some element of sadhana in the 5th, Katakarenuvat, and with all of life possibilities present, and one finds the Jnana Guru and awakens from the dream in the 6th verse, which is the whole samsara is taken as the dream, Raga Dvesha, built on the substance of Raga and Dvesha, and one awakens from that dream. That is the story in 6th, and there ends the scheme of things for the whole work. Then from 7th to 15th, we are going to have the problem definition on what is this world. But then back to fourth and fifth. Fourth now. Ariyamayal maraivanadu pol. Maraivanadu pol. That is, Eva, as though it is covered. Maraivanadu pol Anma, arave ahdu. As soon as that ignorance is removed, ekamadahi, the jnana becomes one. The jnana, as soon as the ajnana is removed, the ajnana is only the covering which manifests as the multiplicity of objects seen. So what is the essence of jnana being God? Ekamadahi. There is only one. Ekamadahi. Niraivai ilakume tanai. Swayam prakashate yatma. This swayam prakashate is a very key indicator in our inner journey. As we do Atma Vichara, whenever we can see a thought, whenever we can see sensory objects, the sensory objects don't come and say, we exist. It is only the consciousness from within. Something, Bhagavan says, something from within says, the cow is there. So the objects do not come and say, the breath does not come and say, the thoughts do not come and say that I exist. So, this Swayam Prakashate, only in self-attention, we can come to the Swayam Prakasha Atma. Everything else is lit up by a light other than itself. The Atma alone is lit up by itself. To see a light, you don't need another light. To see other objects in darkness, you need a light apart from the objects. Therefore, Swayam Prakashate Atma, Ariyamayal Maraivanadu pol, Parichinna iva jnane, Parichinna iva as though covered, Parichinna iva jnana, Tannashe sati kevala. As soon as that ignorance is destroyed, Kevala means one, alone. That's what Bhagavan, Ondrai, Niraivai, Tanai, Ekamai, Ilagum. Parichinna ivajnana, Tannashe sati Kevala, Swayam prakashate hyatma, Mekhapaye shumaniva. Swayam prakashate atma. Niraivai ilagume tanai. Niraivai in all its fullness, ilagume will shine, tanai, swayam. Iriyave meham. As soon as the cloud cover is dispersed, ilagum adittan enave. How the sun shines by itself. As soon as the cloud cover is removed, as soon as the ignorance, the who am I, the attachment, nanudiyadu ulla nilai. As soon as the I thought stops arising. In Atma Vichara, till when is the ignorance said to exist? Till there is a motive force within which pushes the I thought to arise. What is Jnana Sthiti? Jnana Sthiti is nanudiyadu ulla nilai. Nam aduvai ulla nilai. Where from the Swayam Prakasha Atma, the I thought does not arise, does not have any vasana or motive shakti to push it into ignorance. Tannashe sati kevala. When is ignorance to be completely destroyed? When the I as a thought is dismantled completely and is destroyed and absorbed in the Swayam Prakasha Atma. So, Swayam Prakashate Atma Mekhapaye Shumaniva. Niraivai ilagume tanai, iriyave meham, ilagum adittan enave. So, here I would suggest that we take Bhagavan's interpretation only, that Parichinna is to be interpreted as the covering. If you go to Sanskrit dictionary, that is the first meaning. Only the second and third meanings give the meaning of the whole being limited into something that can be perceived, that can be held, that can be experienced, that can be acted upon, but limited. But that comes in the, for us it is not left. We can see that in the dream thing that Acharya tells in verse number 6, the parichinna in terms of that limitation. Let us see in verse 6. In this verse, let us stay with the definition that parichinna means covering. Ariyamayal maraivanadu pol parichinna iva. It is not, it has been covered. It is as though it has been covered. In reality, the Maya does not exist. What is Maya? The mind taken to be apart from reality is Maya, and the mind taken to be one and not other than reality is the destruction of Maya, Bhagavan says in the talks. What is that? The mind taken to have a power apart from the reality is Maya. The mind merged into reality is the destruction of Maya. That is the meghapaye, the removal of ignorance. Is that to think that the mind has independent capacity is ignorance, is Maya. To see that for whom is this thought that the mind is here this minute, next minute it is depressed, the next minute it is enthusiastic. Now for whom is this thought takes one to the understanding that none of these states of mind can be independent of one's knowledge of one's own existence. So hold that fragrance, says Bhagavan. How the dog will hold the fragrance of its master. The fragrance of the self, the Swayam Prakasha Atma in us, in the Jiva, is the knowledge of one's own existence, independent of any other validation required. If anybody is asked the question, do you know that you exist? Nobody will say no. So that knowledge is self-revealing. Whereas all other knowledge is revealed by this knowledge, and this knowledge identifying with the limitation is the covering of the Hyatma. So that is verse number 4. Ariyamayal maraivanadu pol Anma arave dekamadahi niraivaai ilagume tanai iriyave meham ilagum adittan enave parichinna ivajnana tannashe sati kevala swayam prakashate hyatma meghapaye shumaniva. The next one here, the Ariyamai is now reduced to Jiva. In the previous verse, it was kept at ignorance level. One has not the possibility that one identifies with Eka Jiva Bhava, or one feels that one is in the common lot with all the limited beings. That opening was still kept there. But here, the assumption is that there is a very strong feeling, identity, that I am having my own separate problems. That I am so different from others. I have unique problems. Whereas the previous one does not make the ignorance that deep. It keeps the possibility open, just like the cloud cover. Whereas here in this verse, it gives the possibility that my ajnana is deeper. That the Jiva Bhava, that I have to achieve something and I have to reach a goal from point A to point B is so strong that the Jiva Bhava is very strong. So here, when Jiva Bhava is very strong, then Jnana Sadhana is required. The purifying Jnana Sadhana is required. What happens then? The Jnana Sadhana is done along with the Jiva Bhava. It has not attacked the Jiva Bhava directly. So what happens to that? Does that remain? Does the Jnana Sadhana remain? That was one of the questions I had asked in one of the seminars in 2004 in another group, where the answer was that you have to keep doing sadhana without end. That sadhana has no end. Whereas that is not the teaching in Acharya's works, that Ajnana can be brought to an end. It can be brought to an end. What happens to the Jnana Sadhana? Katakarenuvat. It, like the purifying nut powder which attaches itself to the dirt and settles down and is washed away and is cleaned and only the pure water is taken. Similarly, the Jnana Sadhana also, like that dust powder, that nut powder which settled along with the dirt, this also settles along with the karmas and is washed out and pure Jnana is filtered out. But here in this verse, a little bit more of Ajnana is present, where some time period of Jnana Sadhana is included. Let us see the verse in Sanskrit as well as in the Tamil translation. This is verse number 5. The Sanskrit verse is Ajnana Kalusham Jiva. Because of Ajnana Kalusham, there is a disturbance. The life of Jiva is full of disturbance because of Ajnana. So a little bit more than the Megha. Jivam. Jnana Abhyasa Nirmalam. So by the Jnana Abhyasa, which is the Jnana Abhyasa in Atma Bodha, we will get verses 31 to 41, which is the Nididhyasana shlokas. The Nididhyasana verses, those have to be held in meditation. So that Jnana Sadhanam, what it does, it purifies the mind. But the question arises, will that remain? Will that remain eternally, that one has to keep doing the purification again and again? No. The moment the dismantling of the Ajnana is there, the Jnana Sadhana also gets dismantled and vanished. That's why Bhagavan says that the who am I is like the stick that stirs the funeral pyre. It also burns all the time along with the other things. And finally it is thrown into the fire as everything is burnt and it is no more needed. Only so far as Ajnanam is there, the Jnana Sadhana is required. The Ajnanam, the dirt is gone. Where is the need for the Jnana Sadhana? That the Acharya brings out with a beautiful metaphor called Katakarenuvat. Ajnana Kalusham Jivam Jnana Bhyasa Nirmalam. By the Jnana Bhyasa, it becomes purified. Krutva Jnanam Swayam Nashyej. The whatever Jnana Bhyasa you have done, it becomes self-dissolved. How? Jalam Katakarenuvat. How in the water purifying process, how that nut powder is automatically removed along with the dirt. Similarly, the Jnana Sadhana is also jettisoned. One doesn't do Nididhyasana, as Bhagavan says, the moment does anybody keep saying, I am man, I am man, I am man. Similarly, in Brahmajnana, will the Jnani be saying, Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi, Aham Brahmasmi? No. That Jnana Sadhana is no more there. One abides as that consciousness which is effort free, which is not even self-luminous. Where is the need for self-luminosity? In the self. There is only the self, which is the being which Bhagavan teaches. But we are jumping ahead again. Ajnana Kalusham Jivam. Jnana Bhyasad Nirmalam. Krutva Jnanam Swayam Nashyej Jalam Katakarenuvat. See how Bhagavan beautifully translates this. In the earlier verse, Bhagavan brings more light to the normal commentaries, that don't yet jump to the feeling that Parichina means it has now reduced to the world, it is covering of the self. Here, the word for word translation and without losing the meter, Ariyamayam Kalakam, Arumuyir, Tuidam Arivu Payirchinal, oh, Arivum Ahatri, Ariyamai Adiyume, Neer Mas Agatr, Tetram Podi Oppa. In Tamil, the nut powder used is called as Tetram Podi. That is the metaphor. So the metaphor can be lightly looked at and given. What actually happens in sadhana, as we do the Aham Brahmasmi or the 10 verses that are mentioned in this work and hold them in Nididhyasana, The I am the body, gross, subtle, causal, that gets dismantled. And as it gets dismantled, the beauty is one need not hold the nididhyasana dhyana very, very hard. Only when the gross attachment is there, the sadhana also is very hard. As the attachments are subtle, a gentle holding is enough. And when this is dismantled, this is not there. This is not required at all. The sadhana also vanishes along with the dismantling of the ego. Ariyamayam kalakkam arumuyir. So here it is a little bit more dense. The ignorance is more dense than in the previous verse. There, just the nature of that sadhaka, Bhagavan says, there are many types of devotees who come to him. And some of them, the moment they come to the Nayana Diksha or the Mauna presence, their ajnana is gone. Just by sitting in Bhagavan's Samadhi, many would be the ones who have removed their ignorance. Today, in Bhagavan's bodily presence, many would have silently come, removed their ignorance. We had seen in letters the Acharya from Puri coming asking for a specific doubt. And when Bhagavan clarifies the doubt, he says it's not clear. Then Bhagavan gives him Nayana Diksha for half an hour. And he gets the anubhava of the yoga of Paramashiva and Parameshwari. That place where the Paramashakti comes and says to Shiva, let me be as quiet as you. That is experienced by the Acharya in the Nayana Diksha of Bhagavan. And he says, I have understood. I have understood what that means. What that yoga means. When the shadow of the self falls on the Spurana, how the Spurana quietens into the Purna. That is what happens, Bhagavan explains. But then gives the experience. In that experience, what happens when the ego or the ajnana is dissolved? Along with it, does Bhagavan need to keep giving the diksha continuously? Because that diksha is the substitute for the sadhana. The Mauna Sannidhi of Bhagavan is the substitute. Does it have to keep working? No. The moment the ajnana is gone, the work required is also gone. Whether it is by Guru Karuna or by the Guru Karuna making us work, do the Atma Vichara. Either way, the Atma Vichara is no more required after the point of dissolution of the ignorance. Ariyamayam kalakkam. So here in this verse, the uyar is taken, the jiva is taken, jiva bhava is stronger. What happens when the jiva bhava is stronger? I am separate is stronger. All the confusion start coming. How am I going to get out? How is this relative of mine going to get better? How are those people who are of my same sect? How are they going to become better? How are these people who are in my country and they are suffering so much? How are they going to get better? There are so many layers and layers of confusions that can come when the jiva bhava is strong. How is it removed? Jnana abhyasa. Tuidam arivu payirchina. Let us take arivu payirchi to be atma vichara. The atma vichara, what it does, it starts burning all those. To Ganapati Muni, we have seen, Bhagavan says that even you need not meditate on such a thing as the liberation of India. You hold atma vichara. The Ishvara, the greatest doer, will bring about liberation at the right time. You go for his self, Bhagavan says. Don't go for his power. Don't go asking or praying for anything which will only come from his omnipotence. But go for his omnipresence. When you are going for the omnipresence, the Swayam Prakasha Atma, then whatever is there in omnipotence and whatever is there in omniscience is included in the omnipresence. That's why Bhagavan says, go for the omnipresence, the omnipresent Atma. Here the Jiva is having more confusion. So there is a time period allotted for Atma Vichara. Do Atma Vichara for so many years. Do this jnana sadhana for so many years. All that is done. But then, is it unlimitedly to go on the jnana sadhana, which is itself present in the presence of ignorance? No. As soon as the ignorance and the ego are dismantled, the jnana sadhana also gets removed. Tuidam arivu payirchiyanal av. Arivum ahatri. Ariyamai aliyume. Now, how will the ignorance go? As soon as ignorance goes, the arivu payirchi also goes. The jnana sadhana also goes. One doesn't feel like doing, who am I? N.R. Krishnamurti here says that he was a practitioner of Ramanam. And while practicing that, he comes to Bhagavan and learns from Bhagavan that the Ramanama is to be held like Sudarshana Chakra. The payirchi given to him is, don't hold japa and dhyana ordinarily. It should be going on like Sudarshana Chakra Nitya. It should be going round and round and round. It will cut all the ariyame. Then it becomes natural for him to do the Ramanama japa. But when he comes to the ashrama, he finds that the Ramanama japa also stops. And he reports that to Bhagavan. Bhagavan, outside I am able to do Ramanama japa. But what is happening here? As soon as I come, the Ramanama japa, which displays everything else, that itself I am not able to hold. And that is the experience which Bhagavan is saying here. That in Bhagavan's Sannidhi, the Ariyama is completely removed, kept in abeyance at least. So the payirchi is also you are unable to do. When the doer is not there, how can any doing happen? Even that of dhyana or jnana payirchi. So when that was in Bhagavan's Sannidhi, many of the devotees would claim that they go into silence. Bhagavan would say, you should continue to be in the Sannidhi and make it your own. That you are in silence naturally. Otherwise, this ignorance will come out again. We have the example of an English lady, and also Kunjuswami feels he is now steadily in the jnana state where the ignorance is not coming up, and decides to go to his hometown. As soon as he goes back there, all the ignorance and all the problems come. At least he is aware that he is now caught up in those confusions. He runs back to the ashram and asks Bhagavan, what happened? That I was so clear, but all this, Bhagavan says, you have still not dismantled. The Chit-Jada Granthi is not yet over. So stay and wait. Don't be in a hurry. The Sannidhi is giving you the experience of Purna Jnana, but then the Chit-Jada Granthi is still there. Let it get burnt off. You will know by yourself. Then the Jnana Abhyasa is also not required. How it is not required? Nirma Sagatrum Tetram Podi Pol. Like that Tetram Podi which is put into the muddied water, it gets attached to the dirt particles and all those get sedimented. They all come down and the purified water is taken out. The Jnana Abhyasa also is removed along with the dirt which has settled down. That is the 4th and 5th verses. In the 6th verse, an even more inclusive provisioning of ignorance, where one is taking the whole world to be of some use, of some purpose. The example of dream, where the Guru is also really present and gives us instructions. That is what is to be taken in the 6th verse. But let us sit in the Jnana Abhyasa, which is also going to get dissolved in the water of Atman, like Katakarenava. But why go to the result? Let us stick to the Abhyasa of Atma Vichara. Till 8 o'clock we will do that. Then we can listen to our President, Dr. Sharanaka. Raivatima, you can set the time for us till 8 o'clock. Thank you. Namo Ramana. Namo Ramanaka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings. In these verses, the concept of ajnana, the removal of ajnana, is being addressed. So, as Nandakumar ji told us, that in the fourth verse, it is like a very famous verse actually, the Meghapai. It's like clouds are hiding the sun, and when the cloud of ignorance is hiding the sun, we are not able to see the sun. I often give this example that you see a child keeps watching the sky and sees the movement of the clouds. And after some time, the child, young child, say 3 years old, just being to speak, or 4 years old, calls out to the mother and says, "Mother, I have discovered how sunlight is created." And mother says, "Is it so, dear? How is it created?" And the child says, "It is created because of the movement of clouds." See, whenever the clouds move, then the sunlight is there. But is the sunlight created by the movement of the clouds? The mother says, "No, not at all, dear. It is the other way around. The clouds are hiding the sunlight which is ever available." So that is the way we perceive it. We perceive things actually. We look at movement as being more significant than stillness. We look at thoughts as being more significant than the being, more powerful. So we seek the movement. We give value to the movement rather than to the stillness. But the light is ever is. It is only the clouds which are hiding the light. Just as Bhagavan says that it is the movement of thoughts which obscures the experience of the self. So when there is no thought cover, the self is shining forth naturally. So all we have to do is go cut across the veil of thoughts, or recognize that these thoughts are alone obscuring the self, and not follow thoughts through our attention. When that happens, automatically the sunlight of the self will shine forth. There is a sadhana implied in the sense when we come to our sadhana here also. Because in nature, the clouds come, the clouds move away. If I remember right, a question has been asked of Bhagavan somewhere. Bhagavan, see, from sleep or from the dream, a dream, we wake up. We do not wake up by our volition. We automatically wake up. And then we know, oh, that was a dream. So if we say that the waking is a dream, it is ignorance, then will we automatically wake from it? But Bhagavan says, no, effort has to be made to wake up. So the effort is required. But what is the difference in this verse and the next verse, where it is equated to the water being sullied? Is the water itself is sullied, whereas the sunlight is not sullied. The sunlight is not touched by the cloud at any point of time. There is no contamination in the sunlight. There is no contamination in jnana. Whereas the example of the alum is given to say that the alum also gets removed. However, one should not be looking at it from the perspective that the water itself gets contaminated and then the water has to be cleansed. Because there is again an instance which comes to my mind in terms of purity of the mind. we used to have these competitions. Nandakumar ji is also familiar with this, inter-school competitions, because once upon a time his daughter Archana had also entered one of Ramanacentre Center for Learning's inter-school competitions. So in that there was an essay writing competition as well, and it was about purifying the mind. There was a question, and one of the children had given a beautiful example. That child had written, see, we talk of purifying the Ganges. What is the process of purifying the Ganges? If we stop contaminating the Ganges, Ganges is pure. We don't have to purify the Ganges. We don't have to put alum into the Ganges. All we have to do is to stop contaminating the Ganges. The mind also, Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi says, it is an Adishaya Shakti springing directly from the self. It is pure. So what all one has to do is to stop contaminating it. One need not actually purify it. There is no purificatory process in that sense. The purificatory process is the process of stopping the impurity, which is the rising of thought. Very simple rising of thought itself, Bhagavan does not accept. He says that is impurity in the self, with reference to the self, because it is a clouding. So when we look at it, it is the process, a process is required, although the self is ever pure. And that process has to be a process which will consume itself. And self-enquiry alone is the process, Bhagavan says, which will consume itself. He gives the example of the stick used to stir the funeral pyre. That is the example given by Bhagavan. That stick used to stir the funeral pyre, that stick also gets burnt of its own accord. But why is it that the sun, though it is shining, cannot reveal itself? When the clouds are there, it should be revealing itself. But it is hidden by the clouds. See, Bhagavan gives another example. He says, just as in the earlier verse we were told that karma is not inimical. It is not inimical to ajnana. It is not the enemy of ajnana. But what about jnana? Jnana is obviously the enemy of ajnana. So the sunlight should be visible at all times. Jnana should be visible at all times. So why the process? Why the sadhana? Bhagavan has given the example. He says, say there is sun. The sunlight is pure fire actually. It is pure fire. And we have, he says, a bale of cotton which is placed in the sunlight. Now the bale of cotton should catch fire. Just by the sun's rays falling on it, it should catch fire. But that is not the case. Though the sun is pure fire, it does not set fire to anything, or it does not burn away the ajnana, the bale of cotton. It will not directly burn. It requires a catalyst, a lens. If the sunlight passes through a lens, then immediately it will set fire to the bale of cotton. Similarly, the lens of self-enquiry, the sadhana of self-enquiry is needed to capture the energy of the self and allow it to burn away the ignorance. Now, in this burning of the cotton, the lens does not burn the cotton. Neither does the lens create the sunlight. The lens only acts as a catalyst. Even so, self-enquiry is not going to, it does not, the self itself burns away the ignorance. But the self burns the ignorance moving through the powerful lens of self-enquiry. Says Bhagavan, the jnana alone burns away the ajnana. The jnana destroys the ajnana. Automatically, we saw in the earlier verses also that when jnana appears, then automatically ajnana disappears. When light comes into a cave, says Bhagavan, which is which was in darkness for thousands or millions of years also, the moment a ray of light comes into it, it is lighted. The number of, it does not take, it is not a matter of time also, says Bhagavan. But the sadhana, the jnana sadhana is given to us, and for that purpose, the recognition of, very beautifully Nandakumar said that there is a recognition first of ajnana. So the recognition of ajnana in a sense is an anomaly, because there is no ajnana, says Bhagavan. Professor Swaminathan also used to tell me, my father repeatedly, that there is no ego. But then there is a recognition of an ego. Unless there is a recognition of an ego, one cannot get to the situation that the ego is an illusion, that it is non-existent. Because once one realizes the presence of the shadow, until one is ignorant of it, there will be no clarity about the jnana also. So there has to be clarity about ajnana as well. There has to be clarity about the wrong notion, the existence of a wrong notion. And the moment there is actually perfect clarity about the existence of the wrong notion will automatically drop. To establish us in that perfect clarity about the wrong notion, or to establish us in understanding that it is totally invalid, the question, who am I, the self-enquiry alone becomes the most powerful tool to establish us in the awareness of ajnana also. Because every other awareness of ajnana leaves out the area of the I. It may say, I may say the world is an illusion. What about me, who am part of the world? What about the I, which is part of the world? So it begins from here. This is where Bhagavan's teachings bring the focus back again and again to the I thought and to question it. Why? When one questions the I thought, automatically the entire realm of ajnana is encompassed by that question, and it is addressed, and it is the question also, as Bhagavan says, dissolves ultimately. And that is the immensity, that the very beautiful way in which Nandakumar says, where the Shakti says, absorb me into the silence. So that Shakti, Achala Uruvil, Achakti Odungida, Omgum Arunachalam Yendrari, says Bhagavan. Om Namo Bhagavate Sridam.
Namo Ramanacentre.
Namo Ramanacentre.